Mother Nature might have canceled one game tonight, but we still had a full night of hockey, including the Ducks streak coming crashing down. Lightning and Mammoth battle it out in a goaltenders duel, and the Rangers, Islanders, both looking to end losing streaks here tonight. All that and more on this edition of Locked On NHL Game Night.
When that final horn sounds, you know it's time for Locked On NHL Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. Prepare to experience game day reactions like never before, only on Locked On NHL Game Night. Your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On NHL Game Night, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. And while most of us here on the East Coast thaw off from that recent Arctic chill, we hope you guys are keeping warm wherever you might be out there. And boy, there has been plenty of fire on the ice in the NHL, which we're going to get to here shortly. But in the meantime, be sure to hit that follow or subscribe button. And if you're watching on YouTube, jump in on the comments. Keep the conversation going. So who exactly are we? Well, he's Alex Wiederspiel, a writer for Yardbarker. And I'm TJ Shalott, professional hockey play-by-play broadcaster. And we're going to hang out here a couple of nights a week on Locked On NHL Game Night over the next few days. And alongside our local experts, we're going to cover all that happened on Monday night in the NHL. Plus, keep with us as Alex and I try to decipher the missing links for these teams that were in action tonight. And despite the light schedule and that cancellation, it was still a busy night, plenty to talk about. Let's dive in. Alex, you and I kind of talked about this prior to jumping on the air, but perhaps the streakiest team in all of sports right now, the Anaheim Ducks. They had ripped off 7 straight coming into tonight's matchup against the Oilers, but that's where it'll all stop as Edmonton rolls in this one 7-4. We saw 2 hat tricks in this game, 1 per team. That brings us up to 26 hat tricks in just 2026, averaging 1 hat trick per night in the NHL. But tonight it was all Edmonton. They win this one 7-4.
The Ducks are me in college, essentially. They went 7 straight because they needed to after losing 9 straight, right? So anytime that you didn't show up for class 3 or 4 days in a row, 3 or 4 classes in a row, and then all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of work due, you just got to rife through it and get through it as fast as possible and get it done. And maybe the quality is not the greatest. The Ducks during this winning streak with 2 shootout wins and 2 wins in overtime, but they ultimately get the job done during the winning streak. That does, as you mentioned, come crashing down. Here's the thing is that they kind of lived that in the game tonight as well. If you look at the way they played, that was a tight first period. Second period, they got the doors blown off of them. And then in the third period, first 5 minutes or so of that third period, I thought, boy, these Ducks look unbelievable. The chances that they were creating, Tristan Jarry, and this might be the key difference between Tristan Jarry and Stuart Skinner. And for Edmonton fans and for the Oilers front office, they are certainly hoping that this is the key difference, is that when they needed him to be at his best, he didn't wilt under what was an intense barrage of pressure. Remember, Edmonton's been a good defensive team for a big portion of this season who's had a hard time creating offensive chances, and they looked honestly like Swiss cheese in the early stages of the third period. I know Jarry let 1 in the third, and I know ultimately he let 2 in the third, but he let in, I know he let in at least that one a little bit later after he'd faced a steady barrage. But ultimately, he's able to keep the most important one, the tying goal, out of the net. And it won't look great on the stat sheet, but it was a pretty good, I thought, performance from Tristan Jarry.
You know, at this point, all you need is wins. All you need is 2 points, and Jarry came to play. He allowed in 4, sure, but, you know, the offensive firepowers of the Oilers, they got it done. Ended up getting the hat trick for the Oilers was Matthias Ekholm. He had his 4th, 5th, and 6th on the season. They also added tallies from Darnell Nurse, his 7th of the year. Zach Hyman, his 21st. That one came on the power play. Connor McDavid added an empty netter as well. And on the other side for the Ducks, they would get 3 of their 4 goals from Michael Granlund, his 10th, 11th, and 12th, all 3 of them on the power play. So when you talk about things that the Oilers might want to get figured out, you mentioned they kind of look like Swiss cheese there, even strength 5-on-5. Maybe they want to get their PK kind of figured out here after giving up 3 power play goals in this one. So Edmonton 7, Anaheim 4. Edmonton now 27, 19, and 8 on the year. if this team can heat up, if they can clean up that defensive side, their offense will figure itself out. You don't have a roster with McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, and some of these other players. You don't have them on your roster and not figure it out. They're just too talented. You got to figure out that back end, though.
And I think, in fact, offensively, it took them a little while. It does kind of seem like they have gotten it together there. And if you go by the fancy stats tonight, by the way, they were pretty even in this one. Actually, the expected goals number was dead even, which, I mean, I think from the eye test, I thought pretty similarly, this was a very evenly matched game between these two teams. But it is worth noting that Tristan Jarry still above water by natural stat tricks expected goals counter. So good for him. But yeah, I think Edmonton defensively, I don't want to foreshadow too much, but I do wonder if there could be a defenseman in their future as a result. What would make more sense, a defenseman or a two-way forward? I guess that's a question for a different segment.
Yeah, for sure. And you got to give your props. I know you talked about Jari, but good on 36 of 40. Anaheim was throwing everything, including the kitchen sink at him tonight, but he did just enough to keep everything out. And moving on are the Oilers. They get the victory. And speaking of moving on, we're going to move on. After giving up 8 goals in their last game, the Tampa Bay Lightning, they refused to let Utah get even one on Monday night. The Bolts blanked the Mammoth 2-0. And really, this was a 1-0 game with Tampa getting their second goal in the final 37 minutes of regulation. It truly was a goaltender's duel, despite the fact that it was a 2-0 game. Darren Radish with his 14th of the year on the power play, and Brandon Hagel would get one on the power play as well. And speaking of the goaltenders, Vamelka good on 27 of 29. On the other side, Vasilevsky getting the win. He was good on 28 of 28, just the second shutout of the season for Andre Vasilevsky. So the Lightning, they're another team that just recently had a pretty lengthy streak. We'll see if they're going to mount the horses for another one here.
Yeah, that loss to Columbus, which comes on the back end of a back-to-back, came on the back end of being in 2 different cities in 2 different nights and being in, doing the math in my head here, 5 different cities between January to actually really they went 6 different cities. They literally went Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Dallas, back to Tampa, Chicago, Columbus over a span of about 12 days. That's a lot of travel. Kind of makes sense that they would give up the 8 goals, at Columbus. I'm sure the coaching staff wasn't happy. For me, the most impressive thing about this Tampa Bay team continues to be that if you look at the way that they have won games this season, and again, if you look at, we've talked about it ad nauseum. I know the whole media group in the NHL has talked about this, the injury issues, but to me, it's that Tampa's not just winning games in one way or another. They're not necessarily relying on goaltending any given night. They're not necessarily relying on a high-powered offense or special teams any given night. They're able to adapt night in and night out. And these are the types of things, and I get that this is ultimately irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. These are the types of things when you're able to win in so many different ways that help teams win the President's Trophy. And, let's be real. They had a point streak that lasted for, an entire, 35 days of the NHL season. So there are, if Colorado wasn't as far ahead as they were, probably would have a relatively decent chance of making a run at the number 1 spot in the standings in the entire NHL in the regular season. But that to me is the most impressive thing. It's different contributors, different guys keep going out, whether it's Cirelli going out, whether it's Point going out, whether it's Hedman being out, McDonough being out. It doesn't seem to matter. Any given night, there's someone else that this organization has been able to figure who can at least chip in for 5 games or 7 games or 4 games or whatever it's going to be. Cannot say enough about the way Tampa has built out the organizational depth. These aren't guys that you necessarily win Stanley Cups with in terms of relying on them when you get to the postseason. And it's funny you mentioned Darren Radish, because if you go back and look at his numbers in that Florida postseason series last year, they weren't great for him. He had a really, really rough series. I'm not saying that's the player that he is forever, but if you go back and look at who he was before this season, he was one of those organizational depth pieces that Tampa had cultivated. But the reason why they seem to have taken this step forward is that a guy like Darren Radish seems to have taken a step forward. He looks more like an actual piece to a championship team than an organizational depth piece. That's a question that I look forward to getting answered by Tampa when we get into the postseason.
I think a lot of props has to be given to John Cooper because I believe he's the reason why this team has been able to win in so many different ways. This is a veteran of this game who's won multiple Stanley Cups. He understands what it takes to win. He takes every single game, opponent by opponent, game by game. He looks at who they're going to play, finds a strategy that is going to best put them in a situation where they can win so that he doesn't stress any particular unit. He doesn't stress his power play night in and night out, or his penalty kill night in and night out, or his goaltending, or his forwards. He finds someone new every night and says, listen, this is your job to play the best game of the week tonight. We need this unit to get it done. They respond to that and they get the victory. So, my hat's off to John Cooper. I know a lot of people wanted him out not too long ago. There was a little bit of rumblings that maybe he might be on the hot seat. I think that seat has certainly cooled off, and that's what you get when you have a lot of these, guys, Darren Radishes, and you talk about all the injuries and the key players that aren't on the roster and they're still winning. Well, that comes from coaching, putting guys in a situation to succeed. So they've taken over now, first place in the Eastern Conference. They leapfrog the Detroit Red Wings. They've got 1 point out in front of the Red Wings, Tampa Bay with 70. And on the other side, Detroit has 69, who will be in action here tomorrow night. So that's what's going on in that one between Utah and Tampa Bay. And I'm sure the Mammoth are going to bounce right back. That's a young team. They're resilient. They get knocked to the ice, they bounce right back up.
Yeah, they've dealt with a lot, and we are getting closer. I haven't checked the latest to see how on track he is, but they are getting closer to the return of Logan Cooley. And again, we stress this all the time. In the early stages of that injury, Utah looked like they were going to sink underneath the weight of being without a guy who looked like he was turning into a budding superstar, a guy who, let's be frank for a second here, probably is being talked about the same way we're talking about Macklin Celebrini and Connor Bedard if he doesn't miss 8 weeks of the season. And at the time that he got hurt, we basically were talking about him that way. So they're 7 games over 500, over NHL 500 at this point. They are very much in the race. If they're going to get him back on time and be able to reintegrate him, this is a group that has some runway to figure out how to do that. So I'm not worried about Utah. I think there was a moment where it looked like they were in trouble, and they figured out how to win without Logan Cooley. And the benefit for them is we already know that they know how to win games with Logan Cooley.
We'll see what happens when he comes back. Because like I said, they are a young team with guys like JJ Peterka and Dylan Genther and others. So I'm curious to see what we get out of Utah down the stretch run. But both teams with New York in their name were also in action tonight. The Rangers looking to end their 3-game skid. Meanwhile, the Islanders have lost back-to-back. They're trying to get back into the win column against the Flyers. We've got those games plus some content of our own coming up here on Locked On NHL Game Night. Let's be real, managing your finances can feel overwhelming between subscriptions you forgot about, bills that keep coming up, and trying to figure out where all your money actually goes each month. It's easy to feel like you're losing control. And who has time to track every transaction and hunt down all those hidden fees? That's where Rocket Money comes in, the personal finance app that helps you take control, and it finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. The automatic transaction categorization is a game changer. I can finally see exactly where my money is going each month. I can set budgets and goals, get personalized insights, and receive real-time alerts for large transactions, upcoming bills, and low balances. It even consolidates my checking, savings, and loans and my investments into a single dashboard so I get a clear view of the entire financial picture. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals. Join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. We are rolling on here, NHL Game Night, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And by the way, if you haven't already, make sure you're checking out the Everydayer Club. It's made exactly for folks like you who make us your first stop of the day. And look, if there's two teams that when they get together, the offensive explosions come to the surface, it's the New York Rangers and the Boston Bruins. And the same thing carried true tonight. A total of 7 goals in this one, but it's the Rangers who take it 4-3 in overtime, thanks to a nice comeback with goals in the third to tie it, to force that overtime, and then to win it in the extra period. For the first word on this one, we're going to go to the Bruins side, and Ian McLaren, host of Locked On NHL Bruins, he's got some serious insight from the losing side.
I watched the Boston Bruins play on Broadway tonight, and I am giving them 2 thumbs down and throwing tomatoes on the stage. You have a lead in the third period against the worst team in the Eastern Conference. You absolutely have to close that out, even if you're on the road. The Bruins allowed the Rangers to tie. It was a bit of a goal that went in off Andrew Peeke to tie it in the third period, and then they weren't able to capitalize in overtime. The Rangers win it, get the extra point. It's one thing to get a point on the road, always a nice thing to do. But when you have a lead in the third against a team that's basically called it in like the Rangers have this season, you absolutely have to close that one out. Nikita Zadorov wasn't playing. That certainly was a factor defensively, but the Bruins need to get back home, take 2 points from the Nashville Predators tomorrow night.
I know Ian's a little disappointed there, but this was a seesaw game. You know, New York leading 2-1 after 1. Then the Bruins coming back. They take the lead 3-2 after 2. And yes, you could be a little upset with them that they didn't hang on to that 1-goal lead and ultimately knock off a far inferior New York Rangers team. But you can't be too hard on them. They did get that point, like he mentioned. What were your thoughts on this one?
So I think, one, I didn't think Boston played a really particularly crisp game in this one. A couple of notes. They were opportunistic, right? Like if you look at the goals that they scored, so the first goal, brilliant play from David Pastrnak in the neutral zone, getting space on the zone entry, and then his pass isn't really on the mark, but it unfortunate like misdirect off of JT Miller. I think it was off his skate or his stick and lands right on the stick of Elias Lindholm, who then scores a goal. And it's just brilliance from Pastrnak and a little bit of Bruins luck. The second goal, bad JT Miller turnover, right place, right time for Boston. Third goal, I don't think Jonathan Quick really saw the puck. I don't think he was expecting the puck. I think he saw the shot. I just don't think he was expecting Morgan Geekie to fire that shot, who has been red hot all season. But that was sort of the night for Boston where they were very opportunistic against a team that they shouldn't have to be opportunistic against. And this is not to say, listen, like the Rangers are not your traditional doormat, but they are a team that's missing a Vezina caliber goaltender and a Norris, actually a Vezina winning goaltender and a Norris winning defenseman. And those absences have been notable this month. They have won one game since Igor Shesterkin and Adam Fox both got hurt in that game against the Utah Mammoth. 1 out of 8. This was win number 2 in that stretch of games. It's been a really brutal month of January for the New York Rangers. They're an emotionally fragile team, it looks like. And one other quick note, I know you mentioned the goal scoring. So I did the final tally between the three of them for the bettors. Remember this next year, these two teams combined for 27 goals in 3 games this season. So keep that in mind as you head into any Rangers Bruins betting next year. Might want to remember they averaged 9 a game in the 3 that they played.
Unbelievable. I mean, and look, and it was a back and forth game. And, you know, you saw 3 goals in 3 minutes in the opening period. And I know that's really hard for a team to find any kind of rhythm because, you know, in this case, it was the Rangers who jump out 1-0 and you're at home, you get that opening goal, what you're trying to do. And then all of a sudden it's about 2.5 minutes later when Boston evens things up. So any momentum you had just completely gone. Then you go ahead and respond 26 seconds later and retake the lead 2-1. I mean, that plays with your emotions. That is tough to build off of, especially when you talk about then the second period, Boston gets the 2 goals. Now they're up 3-2. This is truly a game for the New York Rangers that they can hang their hats and be proud about, especially with, again, there was no Carson Soucy because of all the rumors that are flying that he might be on the move.
It did happen, by the way. It's official. Emily Kaplan, during the game, it broke. So he's going to the island for a 3rd round pick, which is, I think, just the second time those two teams have ever traded with each other.
Which is, it's got to feel gross, right?
It's weird. I mean,
Yeah.
the thing is, it's Carson Soucy, so I think for Ranger fans, it's fine. It would be weirder if it were a player they cared a little bit more about. Let me ask you one real quick question on this, just from the Bruins' perspective. We know that the Bruins were where the Rangers are a year ago. I've mentioned it. They were the worst team by points percentage after the trade deadline, after last season. We know how much youth they added, and a lot of those players are playing littered throughout their bottom six. Doesn't this kind of feel like a game where if you're Charlie McAvoy, if you're David Pastrnak, you have to make these guys understand that you can't take any team in the NHL lightly, because that's what it felt like tonight from the Bruins side. They just were not crisp in this game.
I would be surprised if some stuff wasn't thrown around the locker room at the end of the night. It's one of those things where your leadership group will probably stand up and be pretty upset about the performance, especially if you played a solid game, you limited turnovers, you were winning loose puck battles, you were hustling up and down the ice, and you lost to the Rangers. That's fine. But at the end of the day, that's not exactly what happened. So this is where, your leadership group needs to step up. And like I said, I promise you, there were some words exchanged. There was probably a team-only meeting as everybody's sitting around the locker room. Coaches go back to their into their coach's office, and I guarantee you some words were said, because if you want to be a playoff team, you can't lose these games now, because you're not going to get a matchup like this when it comes playoff time. Every single team will be 10 times deadlier than what the New York Rangers have shown that they can be this season. So you better get mentally prepared now for these games. So we'll see. When they take on a team, I think they're done. They are done with the Rangers for the rest of the year. I'd have to take a look at Boston's upcoming schedule to see, who they have on their schedule that's maybe out of the playoff picture and in a similar situation to New York, because I would be curious to see how they rebound and bounce back. I'm wondering if they have a game against like Vancouver or anyone like that. But honestly, no, they don't. They've got a lot of tough games coming up over the stretch.
It's so tough in the East. Like that's why you just like letting a point like this get away, like reeks to me of those are young guys who have not really been through this before. Because then I will say the one that they have coming up that I'd really like to see, like I think the response here is that Boston Philly game. That to me that's one that if you're the Bruins or the Flyers, you have to have that game.
For sure. But we're going to flip gears now. We're going to go to Carson Soucy's new team, the New York Islanders. They take down Philadelphia tonight 4-0. And Philly, look, they toppled the Avalanche 7-3. I mean, they looked like they were on a different planet. And then all of a sudden, the Flyers failed to muster a goal in this one. The Islanders, they get 2 from Jean-Gabriel Pageau and 21 saves from Ilya Sorokin to take the victory. Pageau's 9th and 10th on the year. My big question coming out of this one, New York, I don't think they were expecting to get a Philadelphia team that was just so flat and so down and out. So they took advantage of what was presented to them. But if you're Philadelphia, what's going on with the goaltending? Once again, Samuel Ersson, I don't think he had a great game. He was 19 of 23. That is the biggest question mark for them. And I think the biggest hurdle that's stopping them from being a true playoff team. And it's what's keeping them on the bubble.
I 100% agree. It's hard for me to buy Philadelphia and to come out this flat. Think about the importance of this game. You are 5 points or coming into the night, I should say. You were 5 points and now you're 6 points back of a Boston team who is 5th in the Atlantic Division, right? So your best path forward is going to be catching either the Islanders or the Penguins. And Philadelphia came out tonight without any juice. And I get it. The goaltending has been an issue. And I get it. It's a new coaching staff, so you don't want to necessarily cast aspersions. But this has been the way it's been the last couple of seasons. This is where we start to see the Flyers fade. And if you look at who they've lost to of late, these are losses. Like the Colorado win was fun and it was nice. And it's a good way to end a lengthy road trip. Again, we talked about the trip that Tampa was on. They were in 6 different cities between in over a 10-day span. They went Buffalo, Pittsburgh, New York, Vegas, Utah, Colorado, and they only won 2 of those games, Vegas and Colorado on the road. But they lost in regulation to Pittsburgh, and then they lose in regulation tonight at home to the Islanders. These are the teams that you have to catch, because the path to getting a wild card spot right now in the East doesn't look super realistic. It's not out of the question. We'll see what they do coming up against Boston in just a couple of days, but I just don't see how you come out this flat knowing how important. I mean, this essentially was the closest thing you're going to get to a January playoff game, and they play like that.
When you look back at that Colorado game, that's exactly what you asked for. That is a turning point in your season in the making. You didn't have a great road trip, but you're capping things off in Colorado against the undisputed best team in the NHL, and you handled them 7-3. You more than double them up on the score sheet. That going home, I mean, that flight home should have been the best flight of your lives, short of maybe winning the Stanley Cup if you won it on the road. But you guys are juiced up. You're on the plane. You're coming back. There should have been so much energy coming into this one. Where did it all go? Because that was your opportunity to take what you just did and build off it and really push that snowball down the hill and watch it just keep gathering steam. And they just came out flat. I'm really disappointed to see how that happened, so quickly. And again, like you said, coaching, I'm sure, played into it. And they probably were tired. You can't get past fatigue no matter how much juice you have, no matter, how jacked up you are because of a big win. You can't get past injury and you can't get past fatigue. But Philadelphia is certainly a team on the bubble that looks like they are slowly losing grip on the playoff picture. But coming up, we've got a fun hypothetical for the 8 teams that were in action tonight. We're going to play a little game of missing piece where Alex and I, rapid fire, we're going to tell you what each team sorely needs. Could be on the ice, could be off the ice. So stay tuned for more Locked On NHL Game Night. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. If you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Sponsored jobs boost your post to people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves. Just head to Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support the show by saying you heard it on the Locked On NHL Game Night podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. All right, Alex, this is going to be a little bit of fun. I think this is a brilliant idea. I have to tip my cap to you. Came up with it this afternoon. In this final segment, Alex and I, we're going to flex our imaginary wallets, right? Like in a perfect world where anything's affordable and anything is attainable, we're going to talk about the one thing that each of these 8 teams who saw action tonight needs. Maybe it's something they need to make the playoffs, or maybe it's something that they need just for future success. And it doesn't have to be something on the ice either. So, Alex, let's go rapid fire. We're going to kick things off with the Utah Mammoth. What do they need going forward?
Oh, it's a cop-out, I know, right, to say they need Logan Cooley to not only be healthy, but to be actually healthy, right? It can't be one of those situations where he comes back and he's there. No, they need the Logan Cooley from October and early November. That's the missing piece right now for Utah. And if they're able to spend any other money, great, but I think that's it. Their trade deadline acquisition is already on the roster.
For me, you know what I think they need? They need a veteran to step up outside of Nick Schmaltz, because you've got these young guys, Keller, Peterka, Genther in the lineup now. Cooley's going to be returning soon. So there is that youth movement. They need to make a move, I think, at the deadline for a guy like, I look at what Florida has done over the last handful of years, bringing in a Marchand, bringing in a Giroux, bringing in a Tarasenko. Some of these guys that have been around a little bit, maybe a little bit journeyman, but still always get on the stat sheet. Someone to kind of help bring up these younger guys and show them how it's done. Maybe someone with some playoff experience. I think they could use a big veteran addition. How about the Boston Bruins?
For the Boston Bruins, a little maturity in the room, I think, would go a long way at this point. And there is not a ton of teams that are currently getting ready to sell. But if you could sneak, maybe, again, because we don't want to, I think if you're Boston, I don't necessarily know that you want to overspend, but if you could go out and get someone like, say, a Teddy Bluger from Vancouver, not going to cost you much. And it's a nice low depth piece at center, not going to cost a lot, will give your team a little bit of a boost emotionally, and that they know that you're bought in on the season, even though you might be a little bit ahead of schedule, but you're not overspending. That might be where I would aim for Boston. I don't think that they should do anything too crazy, but I don't like the idea of standing pat and doing nothing. So go get a veteran. If you want to sign him, great. But otherwise, he's not really there. Like, you're not going to miss the third or second round draft pick that you're going to use to get Teddy Bluger. I doubt it's going to cost a second. If you use a third round pick on him, it'll be just fine.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. A guy like Bluger would add to what I think they need, which is a penalty kill. I mean, they had the second worst penalty kill percentage coming into tonight's games of any team that was still in the playoff picture. And coaches love to talk about the 110 rule when it comes to special teams. 90% on your kill, 20% on your power play adds up to 110. If you're in and around that 110 area, you're doing good. Boston's way above that, but that's because their power play is just so lethal. You know, they're high 20s right now in the power play, but they're mid-teens at best in their penalty kill. I think getting a depth player like a Bluger would be perfect for this team. Let someone eat up some of those minutes on the kill while they kind of straighten things out there, because eventually that power play will come back down to earth and they'll be sub 110, and all of a sudden they're going to be struggling on both sides of the special teams coin. So I think they need a penalty kill, and a player like Teddy Bluger, that's a great ad. How about the New York Islanders? And of course, we've got to keep in mind what they just added tonight.
Yeah, in a sense, I kind of like this is it for them, right? Like, I kind of think similar situation, what we were just talking about with Boston. You're ahead of schedule compared to where you expected to be. However, if you are going to add anything else, and I'm going to assume that there's going to be no more business done with the New York Rangers, I'm assuming based on their history together that this is the end of the road for them doing any potential business together. Why not go look and see what the Calgary Flames are willing to shake loose? Obviously, that's a team that has really struggled. And maybe you look, rather than for a guy who is going to be a rental like Bluger, maybe you look for a Connor Zary type who has been a bit of an underachiever for the Calgary Flames based on his draft status at this point. Not a bad player. Definitely an NHL player, not someone that I think Calgary is necessarily going to say that they can build around. And if the right offer got made and you're the New York Islanders, not a bad top 9 piece to add who also fits in with your timeline as a 24-year-old.
I completely agree with you. I think they need that firepower, right? They're second to last in the league in power play percentage coming into tonight with 15.5%. And the Isles are the only team coming into tonight in the Eastern Conference that didn't have a positive goal differential. Now they do now. They're +4 after winning tonight over Philadelphia 4-0. They were a net zero coming into tonight's games. And Sorokin's been playing extremely well. He leads the league in high danger save percentage, just ahead of Brandon Bussey in Carolina. So clearly the back end's doing their part. They need that high end firepower. Susie's a guy that's going to bring you a handful of points from the back end. I do think it's more so that they need that firepower to come from within. I know Jonathan Drouin is drawing a lot of heat right now, only has 20 some odd points. I think he's at 20 even on the season. Even, Tony DeAngelo, low 20s in points. These guys really and truly have to step up and be the offensive firepower for this team. Let's flip the script, go back to the other New York and the Rangers.
Yeah, so the Rangers, I think what occurred tonight is probably what they don't want to happen if you're Chris Drury. I mean, look, there's always going to be the debate over what coaches, what GMs want, the question over tanking, but I've started doing a little bit of research on this draft class, and right now, if I'm the Rangers, I really want a top 5 draft pick. I think there are 3 guys right now in this draft who could play in the NHL to start next season, and there are 5 guys who should be in the NHL by the end of next season. And if you're not in a position to take one of those 5 guys, I think you're going to be unhappy, especially with the way this season has gone. So I get that, again, kind of a lame answer, but if I'm the Rangers, I really want a top 5 draft pick right now. I don't think they're going to get a lot of wins like this one, so fans can savor it that they got one at the Garden tonight.
Yeah, and I'm going to stick with you on a similar thought process. You know what they need? They need a plan. It's obvious that they're going to start moving some players. They've got a 3rd round pick just tonight for Susie. What else are they going to be doing? They don't have any other guy. They have a handful of guys that are getting older, from Zibanejad, JT Miller. They're not getting any younger. So if you're Chris Drury, don't just be releasing players and trading players and collecting picks and just not having any idea what you're going to do and what you're going to build with what you're collecting. So if they are truly in a retool, that's the word they used, be intentional about this retool. I want to see them have a true and structured plan with the assets they get by selling off the players that they do sell off. Philadelphia Flyers, I think we touched on this one a little bit earlier. What do you got for them?
This is my favorite one because you could go either direction with this. So you talked about the 110 rule, and the Flyers special teams have been garbage this season. Power play is 30th in the league at 15.5%. Penalty kill is, I think, 21st at 78%. They're way below the 110 rule. So there are a couple of different options here, but the one that I would love to see, and I just don't think there's any chance it would happen, but you and I have decided that money is no object here. There is absolutely nothing standing in the way of it in our make-believe world. I want them to see if they can fix Elias Pettersson. I have to believe that Rick Tocchet can find a way to get the Pettersson that we saw 2 years ago back out. Now, maybe that's not what Tocchet wants. He did leave Vancouver for a reason, but I would love to see that Philadelphia fan base has been starved for a center for a long time. Now, listen, Pettersson's a really underrated all-around player. He is also part of one of the worst penalty kills in the National Hockey League in Vancouver. I don't know how much he will help Philadelphia's penalty kill, but I've got to think that he can help Philadelphia's power play that has been anemic forever. This is multiple coaches now. This has been a problem. You've got to get at least one of these things fixed.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm going to go on the other side, though. I kind of hinted at it when we talked about it. They got to get goaltending figured out. Samuel Ersson does not look like he's going to be the future. Dan Vladar, yes, he was playing very well before he got hurt, but again, he's not the long-term solution here. Unless they get Samuel Ersson to play more up than down, because he is a guy that rides that roller coaster like no one else. If they can get more up games out of him, they might be a threat to sneak their way in, but I just don't see that happening. So I'd like to see them clean up their goaltending situation. And if I could jump in front of you here, talking about Edmonton, our next team up, it's kind of a similar point for me. I'm looking across their roster. I'm seeing Pickard, I'm seeing Jari, I'm seeing Ingram. That's Pickard at 33, Jari at 30, Ingram at 28. I dove into their prospects. They don't have a single goaltending prospect that is young outside of Emil Vinny, who is playing in the Finnish 2 league, basically the AHL in Finland right now. He's a 20-year-old. That's all they've got. They've got to make a move for some kind of stability in net.
If there is a way to pull it off, again, I'm not saying I know the answer to it, but if there is a way to pull it off, they're the team that should go get Vincent Trocheck. I don't know if Vinny Trocheck would want to move his entire family completely across the continent, but there is one very compelling reason to do it. Well, two really compelling reasons to do it. Their names are Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Vincent Trocheck is a perfect example of a guy who could allow Ryan Nugent-Hopkins to move permanently to the wing for this playoff run. He can play 3C when McDavid and Draisaitl wind up at 1 and 2, and then when they go supersonic mode and play McDavid and Draisaitl together, he's perfectly equipped to move up into that 2C role. Basically, what they had Adam Henrique doing a couple of seasons ago that he's really not equipped for now, that's what Vincent Trocheck could do for this Edmonton team.
All right, real quick, let's jump through Tampa Bay and then get to Anaheim.
Tampa Bay, it's simple. Give me Blake Coleman back, baby. It's reunion time. I want Blake Coleman back in Tampa Bay. I've been standing for this seemingly all season long. I think it needs to happen.
Yeah, that would be fantastic for them. For me, I'm going out on a limb here and saying it's nothing they can do so much as they just need a break in the division. I mean, they're 8-1-1 in their last 10, and they still got to compete with Detroit, who's also 8-1-1 in their last 10. You got Buffalo right behind you, 7-2-1 in their last 10. It just doesn't seem fair for Tampa. I mean, they're coming out here playing some of the best hockey of any team in the league, and here they are just constantly, as soon as they look in the rearview mirror, there's another two teams that are just constantly nipping at their heels. That's one of the hardest divisions in all of the NHL. The entire division separated by just 15 points. Anaheim, what do you got?
The team that I would like to see do what I'm going to say for Anaheim is LA. They didn't play tonight, and the truth is I don't think they're in a position to try to pull this off anyway. But the Ducks may as well just steer into the skid at this point and become the Gerard Gallant era New York Rangers and go get Artemi Panarin and just complete it. Panarin, Trouba, Strome, Vetrano, all of them back together. Just go, and Chris Kreider, just go and get it done. I don't even think they need him. I don't see how that actually helps them in any conceivable way, but why not at this point?
For me, it's health. Not only do they got to get their guys back, Troy Terry, Leo Carlson, Peter Mrazek, you mentioned Frank Vetrano, that Mason McTavish, they're all out with injuries, but they also have to stay healthy, which is the bigger ask, I think, of the two. When you take a look outside of illness to Radko Gudas a couple of weeks ago, he missed back-to-back games. They have not had an injury to their defensive unit. You would have to go all the way back to November 15th. It was Gudas again with an upper body injury, and he only missed one game. I think their defense is the reason they're hanging around, and it's because they're healthy. That'll do it for our missing pieces and what we would add to the teams that are out there. And that'll do it for us here on Locked On NHL Game Night. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you might be watching or listening from. And make sure you're locked in for the Everydayer Club, an exclusive program for listeners just like you who make Locked On NHL Game Night your first stop for hockey content. For Alex Wiederspiel, I'm TJ Schlott. We'll chat with you after Tuesday's packed schedule for another Locked On NHL Game Night, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network, your teams every day.